And we can test it. We can measure it. You know how I know this? Ever had a myogram? Where they stick the little sticky things, put a machine, see if that muscle moves. Have knee surgery. You get to do that. Woohoo! It's kind of cool sitting there watching that muscle move and you ain't doing nothing. You're like, ooh. Then they turn the little machine up, give it a little more electricity, make them little ions flow a little more. You're watching it and they're going, whoa, and then you're like, ow! Because they've got too many of those chemicals moving. So I can test that. So if you remember from part 1, when muscle contraction occurs, if you think about a muscle, longest muscle of the body, sartorius. Okay, everybody remember that one? Do you remember how, like if we got rid of this connective tissue wrapping that's around it, this muscle cell was also a muscle fiber. So think about eating roast. You eat roast, and as you eat, pieces look like if it's cooked really good, you know? Okay, not roast is not cooked good, but a roast is cooked good, okay? It looks like it just falls apart, okay? Think of like one of those little pieces of that roast being a fiber. One cell, okay? So if I were to be able to remove this connective tissue and then peel one little piece, I'd have a fiber or one cell.
One cell of the muscle.
And because this is a muscle, which is a group of those fibers, each fiber has its own nerve supply. The muscle as a whole has a nerve that comes in, and then that nerve branches and goes to each. Yeah, remember that from part 1? So, comes time for us to move, okay? Well, first of all, how do we kind of get that whole process going? How do we get that process going of wanting to get up and move? Write a note. Move my head. Lift my arm. You think about it. It starts in the frontal portion of your brain, in the frontal cortex, and it helps to keep cells, muscle cells, with some tension, some electricity. Well, now we've gotten the full-blown signal to move. And so now that we have gotten the full-blown signal to move, all that information from the nerves is going to start moving, traveling down the axon. We're going to get the release of the acetylcholine. Acetylcholine is going to have to do something. Do you remember when that acetylcholine gets released? What it does?
It binds to the proteins on the membrane.
It binds to a protein on the membrane. In this case, if you look over on the back and on your page, do you see the one where it looks like you've got where it says receptor, enzyme, channel, gated channel? This is going to be a gated channel protein, meaning it's going to be blocked. The name of this protein, it would be ligand gated. Okay, so this one, ligand gated. Ligase, to bring together. Okay, so what you're going to find on this particular protein, well, let's step back a second. This is my muscle cell. Okay, because remember, a muscle cell is a long fiber. Okay, so at some point on that fiber, the nerve cell meets it. It only meets it at this one point. Okay, so we only need this area of that muscle cell to have ligand gated proteins. So there will be an area on that protein that the acetylcholine can attach to. When the acetylcholine attaches, what happens to the gate? The gate opens. This gate opens. What gets to rush in? Sodium. Do you guys remember that now? Is it ringing a bell? So, sodium, let's get my colors right. Sodiums, which are positive charges, get to rush into the inside of the cell. Once again, on the inside, I'm more negatively charged than positively charged. But now that I've had an influx of sodiums come in, what does that now do to the negative charge inside the cell?
Makes it positive.
Makes it positive. And therefore, my resting membrane potential begins to move towards 0 because I'm getting more positive. Once I get to a certain point, if the positive changes enough, I reach something called threshold. Does everybody remember that? And at threshold, if we reach it, that muscle's going to contract and we cannot stop it. So, once I get to threshold and I surpass it, there comes a point that that's all it can do, and it's got to return to rest. So, my positives rush in. But wait a minute, that's changing this portion, but to make it work down the entire membrane of this muscle cell, something else is going to happen. If I affected my voltage, my charge, my voltage, the next protein that is going to get affected is called a voltage-gated protein. Does everybody remember that? Okay, voltage-gated. Meaning it recognizes that this section got too, well, it became more positive, and therefore the gate opens, and what gets to rush in? What's a whole lot of on the outside? Sodiums. Positives. More positives get to rush in, once again affecting another section of the membrane, making it more positive. I could have all the way down the length of that muscle cell, muscle fiber, okay, well, not tons, but a lot of voltage gated. But eventually, I got to make sure it goes back to rest. What has to happen for it to go back to rest, to being negative? What do we need to pump out? I got to get the sodiums back out of the cell. So, a lot of people kind of remember this one. Y'all remember that sodium, potassium pump? Does everybody remember that one? Okay. So, I get to this protein that is now a pump. The sodium potassium. It works on a 3:2 ratio, pumps out 3 sodiums, but allows 2 potassiums in, but that allows the inside of my cell to go back to negative, and that muscle cell is back at rest. Then we just simply wait for another impulse. Do you happen to remember any of that from part 1? Now let's think about this for a second. Sodium was a major player at this point. But in skeletal muscle, what was it that caused it to contract? Starts with an S. The sarcomere. What were the contractile proteins in that sarcomere? Actin, myosin. When the sodium entered the plasma membrane, now this is skeletal muscle, okay? Very similar concept for smooth muscle. You'll see there's some differences, okay? But very similar concept, okay? The sodium, once it entered, do you remember how muscle cell had the sarcoplasmic reticulum? What was in that? What chemical, what ion was stored there? Calcium. And when the calcium got released, what did it cause those contractile proteins to do? Do you guys remember the sliding filament theory? And it caused the actin and myosin. We got the pull, and it caused muscle to contract.